everybody, Will here, and I am joined by designer and illustrator Blake Stevenson. Some of you may also know him by his Instagram and internet footprint, jetpacks and roller skates. Blake, thanks so much for taking the time. How are you today?
I'm good. It's a Friday, like we chatted about. But yeah, I'm excited, man. This is going to be a cool thing.
Yeah, totally. Can you give us just a little bit more background as to what you do?
I definitely consider myself a man of like many different hats. Day job, I do the UX UI design thing, but then like the internet footprint that you kind of alluded to, the jetpacks and roller skates, is more of like a illustration design illustration. I guess that hat. And yeah, I don't know. I like to draw pictures and color things. I don't know if that's I guess with a to put a little spin on it, I do love like to draw cats, like skulls. I love everything that is kind of youthful pop culture.
Yeah,
And kind of that harkens back to the nostalgic things that I do remember as like a 90s kid. Things were a little bit sloppier. Things were a little bit, had a little bit more handmade vibe to them.
nice. That's awesome. Do you consider that kind of like your 9 to 5 UX UI design? And is the illustration a little more like kind of creative outlet?
Totally. Yeah. I definitely use it. I consider it like my Zen moment, because you know how like there's a lot of people do the meditation stuff now. I find like I don't know, I'm a busybody. I can't do that kind of thing. But when I sit down and I like have the drawing pad in front of me and I'm just in that space, it feels like time is just like standing still. I can kind of go through my weird ideas, patch them together. It's that time that I can just be infinitely creative. And if anything, I think it's such a rewarding thing to have that, because I find it, anything that I do in there, I also take back to either my day job in other kind of aspects, or it's just that way to relax at the end of the day. And
Totally.
if I don't do it, it feels like I've kind of missed something in the day. It's almost like I'm doing myself a disservice, which kind of, it sucks because it is somewhat time consuming.
Yeah,
But it does leave me in a happy place.
pretty awesome when your Zen moment is also one that, you could also kind of consider productive. Like
Yeah,
that's a sweet spot.
I don't know how I got into that place, because I definitely have talked to a number of designers that they punch the card, they leave, they want to stop kind of creating.
hmm
And I'm just like, oh, why? I love what I do so much that I just, if I could not stop ever, it would be great. But I'd probably also just collapse at some point. So
That's true. Yeah, it sounds like you found a good balance.
yeah, I think so.
How long have you been designing?
In the 10-year range kind of thing.
Okay.
Graduated college, kind of got an internship, and then jumped right into the field, like first doing freelance and then moving into more marketing space. But yeah, as far as the jetpacks and roller skates thing has gone, like that's kind of been on the shelf for those 10 years. But how I've been doing it, like in a more, I guess, productive, professional, doing it for the community, all that kind of stuff, has probably
hmm
been more in the 5 to 6 or 7 years time frame.
And what made you I guess what made you get started in design? Was it just something you knew you loved early on?
Yeah, I think it harkens to that whole, like, I grew up in a small town where there wasn't like too much to do. I loved to watch cartoons in the morning. Like, I was the kid that like loved the sugary breakfast cereals, and like, though we had like, I didn't have cable, we didn't have very many channels, but there was always like the block of cartoons. And it's almost like
hmm
that regimented, like, oh, I need to watch this and this, and then I can do my daily things. And I just love to like sit in front of the TV and just like watch the bright colors, the crazy like antics of those kind of like early like Disney shows, the early Nickelodeon shows. There's just something like so special and manic about it. I look at cartoons now and I feel like it's amped up to like the nth degree.
Oh my
But
gosh,
back
they're
back
insane.
then, yeah, even I found myself down a rabbit hole the other day just watching like 90s cereal commercials. That was a that was a weird place. That weird honeycombs creature that like runs around and steals kids' honeycombs. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And that was just like par for the course back then. That was the first like seed in my brain, like, oh, like somebody told me that like people actually make these things, and I never imagined doing that. But then you kind of like mimic drawing those things. I was really into music. I was really into skateboarding. I was the guy with like the binder, like replicating every logo of skateboard brands, of TV shows, of I just had that like gross binder. Even those, remember those canvas backpacks? I don't know if they
Oh
still
yeah.
do that, but yeah, I drew all over mine, and it had like Green Day logos, Nirvana logos. Like that was it.
All
And
over
then
your
like,
Jansport.
oh yeah, Jansport for sure. And then like you get caught in a rainstorm, and the thing looks like a garbage mess. So yeah,
That's
it's
funny.
really just my illustration is very much kind of trapped in that nostalgic world of video games, skateboarding, television. I just love that, but I always like to put my own spin on it, and that's kind of like where all of my inspiration, why I got into this, was just like I always wanted to create the things that made me happy as a kid.
And something you kind of alluded to prior to that, you mentioned jetpacks and roller skates and some stuff you were doing kind of for like the larger community, you said. Yeah, I feel like there's almost this weird like mythos around the design community.
The
People
community.
refer to it, but no one really knows. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like that. No one, like, it's this ominous thing. Not a lot of people know what it is, but they also know they want to be a part of it.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I hear that. It is a weird beast because it exists, but it's not. I don't know. It's like kind of a weird thing because I didn't know it exists, to be completely honest, until about the 6 years ago probably, when I went to, or I found out about the WMC Fest, which was Weapons of Mass
yep.
Creation, like 20, I don't know, 13, 2014. I don't even remember
Hmm.
anymore. I had only ever known design conferences as the like Adobe Max
Yep.
and the kind of like the more corporate-esque design conferences. And though I was in that world, I didn't necessarily feel like it was me. And then I
Hmm.
found out about these like kind of fringe festivals, and it felt more like these were the kind of people that lived and breathed this kind of like community, or they love to make things from hand, they love to create in their like after hours, they love to like just
Yeah.
be this constant creative. And WMC Fest was this thing that I just went to on a whim, especially somebody from Canada.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily think to like cross those borders, and I went, and it wasn't something intimidating like a big kind of like corporate conference. It was in a playhouse, and there was like maybe a few hundred people instead of a few thousand people, and it was treated almost like something that I was reminiscent of, like a comic book convention where people were selling their wares at tables, pins and buttons and all that, but it was for like their own creations and the things that like harken back to that, the old like 70s, the 60s, the like 80s, like they were inspired by the things that like made them designers and then decided to make their own brands. And you go to that and you start talking to people, and they give you like, oh, I just made these buttons, or I just made these t-shirts because I like this thing. And though you don't realize you're in the heart of this community at the time because you're still at a conference, you're just like, oh, there's something special here, and all these people have the same mindset as I do.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, you say community, but I don't know, like, it is a community, yes, but I think it's a group of like-minded people, and we just happen to bump into each other at a bunch of random things, right? It's a
Yep.
very sporadic community.
Yeah, it's true. But I totally get what you mean. When you go to a WMC Fest,
Yeah.
Creative South, there's an authenticity there that you can't. It's hard to replicate, or
Yeah.
impossible to replicate, really.
And speaking about like that too, it's, you said Creative South, that's another like very prominent community. And like it is fandom, cults, like it is just, it's crazy. Like if anybody else that was not a designer showed up at the thing, or not necessarily designer, a creative,
Hmm.
showed up at the thing randomly, like I feel like everybody in that town in
Yeah,
Columbus
exactly.
is like, what is going on right now? Right immediately, I just felt completely part of something that I was kind of special, and it's hard to replicate that. And like I don't know if anybody else can like, it was just a very weird thing. I also was
Hmm.
like, it was outside of my bubble, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm part of this now, I don't know. So it was it's very cool, and it's just getting out to those things and finding those like-minded people, right? And that is the community, and it exists, but you have to get outside of your kind of shell.
Yeah, totally. Especially, I mean, you mentioned you're in Ontario.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's I think one of the funny things is before you ran into one of my coworkers, Cheryl, at a conference earlier this year,
Yeah.
I actually knew of you. You know,
Which
I'd seen jetpacks and roller skates before. So I was actually familiar, which is wild. Me being in Orlando, Florida,
yeah.
you being in Ontario, but coming across each other is pretty insane.
It is weird. Like you brought that up when we were chatting the other day, and I was kind of like, that is kind of like a weird magical moment that the community and like the internet has like come to bring these people together. And like yourself, like you're obviously like-minded in the sense of like a creative, somebody who is helping run this company that is like just, I guess, funneling creatives through all the time.
Yeah.
So you're probably online looking for whether it's inspiration or looking to see what is out there. If you're also looking to find designers or whatever, you might cross my path at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely put a lot of stuff online, and that is the intention, though, because I know like the internet is infinitely large. As a designer, I do want people to notice my work, whether I let them through those doors of like my Instagram or doing something like this or a podcast. It's always being out there, and it is hard to get outside of your shell and like be comfortable doing that. But if you
Mm-hmm.
do want to, I guess, thrive as a designer or get feedback from that community that we just spoke of, you have to put something out there or you're not going to get anything back.
Yep.
It's just kind of it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But it's like the hardest first step is to just like be vulnerable and let people see your stuff, right?
Totally. I feel like you've really kind of navigated that line really well of, posting work because people need to see, otherwise they're not going to know who you are. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are usually like from the outside looking in, they're kind of scared to like posting their work, not necessarily for the sake of being vulnerable, but for the sake of coming off as inauthentic or too self-promotional. What do you think like
Yeah.
the key is? Because I think the design community can be, I would say, even more than other ones, like particularly adverse to over self-promotion. If you're kind of
Totally.
inauthentic, I feel like it shows fairly easily. What do you think, like, do you have any tips for like what kind of like balancing that line is between, posting because people find inspiration from it and enjoy seeing it, or, to the point that it comes off as overly promotional?
That's a good question. It's definitely a very like hard line to balance on,
Mm-hmm.
because I do find you'll see some designers that will like constantly post like maybe their logo or like they're kind of advertising their brand, and that is just kind of the necessary evil, like especially not necessarily
Sure.
evil, but like it's the thing that you need to do, like if you're trying to promote yourself as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to do that unless I'm, say, like reworking my logo and I want to do like a new version of it. I'm not just going to post my logo up for fun. I'm going to put like some thought into it, like, and then maybe like I will poll the audience. Like, I like to put something out there to see if there is any feedback on it. Do people like it? Do people like think? Am I getting like? Is it crickets?
Yeah.
And then when it comes back, at least I'm interacting in some regard. It's not just me like throwing something out there. And then as far as like the other work I put out there, it is pretty much process, because a lot of times in the early days I would like throw something out to the community and it would just kind of like go out there, and people would ask me these questions like, oh, what pens do you use, what tools do you use, are you
Yeah.
on an iPad, all this kind of stuff. And then I'm like, oh well, like why don't I just start saying that, or like going a little bit deeper into my process, as far as like I'll show sketches this time, or I'll like put notes on my sketch just so you can see like where my mind is at while I'm like building this thing. I might do a
Mm-hmm.
YouTube video of like me going through the process, or like just doing a screen recording with some music over it, just to show that I'm trying to be authentic in like not just posting, but also showing people how like the sausage is made.
Yeah.
And I do love to see that kind of stuff, because as we talked earlier, I am in love with the craft and just the whole idea of creating things.
Mm-hmm.
and by doing that, I feel like I'm contributing to that community as well.
That highlights a big point, I think, is contributing to the community, not just trying to take from it, but I mean, like you said, not just showing off your really polished finished work, but really engaging people in the process. I think that's what, that helps people learn. And like you just said, giving back is one of the biggest things you can do to really be a part of something rather than take from something.
I totally agree with that. And like, don't get me wrong. Every time I post something, I do feel like I'm spamming, because like, and it's getting over that too. Like, if you go into my Instagram, it is littered with hashtags. It is very much like, notice me, like, see me, like all this kind of stuff. But I also do want to help build that community, and by getting more people to see my stuff, that just means like, oh, maybe it'll inspire somebody. Maybe it will, I don't know, get the attention of a brand that I like. Maybe it will, I don't know, just even like give me a little bit more clout in that community. I want to continue to build. I don't want to just post something and like dust my hands of it and walk away and just be like, I did my 2 cents for the day. So I it is sincere, though in my heart, like sometimes it feels like I am just like posting.
Sure.
And then sometimes you'll get like feedback from other people in the community, like, oh, I didn't see that stuff, or I haven't seen your work in a while. And then you're kind of like, really? Like, I feel like I'm just putting it out all the time. So you're never going to win, and you just have to be comfortable in the ambiguity of it all, right?
Yeah, I think that's something you have to remember is like, you're going to be one of however many posts people see during the day. So as much as it feels like it may be a lot to you, everyone else is interacting with so many other things.
Totally. Yeah. The internet is like, we were talking about MTV a little bit earlier. Like, it is the MTV, the liquid television, the robot chicken of the TV screens on all the time. Like, where to look, what to do. Like, that is the internet, but it's just trying to figure out how to be as manic and navigate it as well.
What are like one or two of your favorite maybe interactions you've had that came through social, whether that be getting to meet someone that you really looked up to, or landing a gig just from something you posted, anything like that?
I feel like, and I don't know if I have manufactured this, but I feel like it happens a lot more than I would think. And it could be as small as like somebody just reaching out. Like, I have a lot of students that reach out to me, and I'm like always humbled that they're like, oh, we would love to just talk to you for like, do you want to go for coffee? Or I had a student from Japan who just like reached out randomly, and he's like, hey, would you be willing to get on a call? And there's like a 12-hour time difference, so I'm calling him at like 5 a.m, and he's calling me at like 5 p.m, kind of thing. So it's figuring out like how to balance it, but it's just really cool that those things even happen. But like, as far as the kind of the big crazy ones, it's like, I think the first interaction that I ever had was the director writer Kevin Smith. That was one that I was like super into, like way back in the day, and this was probably like 6 years ago probably that this happened. And I knew he was coming to the town that like I kind of am surrounding, and he was doing like a spoken word thing. And I had posted up, like, every time I do like to show off my like love for nostalgia and all that kind of stuff. So like when I heard he was coming through town, I'm like, oh, I love Kevin Smith. Like, I'm just going to sketch something that I think is cool, and I'll just put it out there. And it went on like, there was no Instagram at that time, or it wasn't popular. And it went on like Twitter, I think. And Kevin Smith is very active on Twitter. So he, I guess, saw this thing and just, I guess, replied me. And it was a picture of him, essentially, his character. He replied me and then said, like, I was like, oh, you're coming through town, I'm going to see your show. And then he was like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, I would love to meet you. And if you have like a print of that, or like print it out or anything, like, bring it by. He's like, if you go around back after the show, he's like, I'll be leaving through this like loading dock. So like, just so you know,
Yeah.
that's where I'll be leaving. So like, just tell the limo driver that like you have something for me and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. And he just like came out, and I was starstruck.
Yeah.
And it was just like this like surreal thing. And then I was like, what, this can happen? It's that self-affirmation of like, oh, I'm creating something that another creator likes, and he would like to meet me or just talk to me. And his whole spiel was like, oh, I love what you do, I can't believe you did, like, I can't do this kind of stuff. And like, it was so complimentary to me. And I was like, what are
Yeah.
you like, it's one of
Do you
those.
know who you are?
Yeah, I know. And I was like just blown away by this. And it's one of those things that it's like now chasing that dragon. Like, I'm always like, oh, I will do another thing, a more recent one. I didn't actually get to meet the person, but I'm a huge fan of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Hmm.
And I did a little like mock poster for I guess the podcast Armchair Expert, which is Dax Shepard's
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah,
And it was just for fun. And the producer of that show like DM'd me, and he's like, hey, like, we really like your work. I usually do the swag for the podcast, but in this particular moment there is something that I think is like more up your alley for your expertise. And it happened to be like one of the co-hosts, they always like joke about her being this like miniature mouse character, so they wanted me to take her likeness and kind of like make it a Minnie Mouse thing, and they wanted to make that into swag. So I got reached out by that producer. I did this like piece of
Wow.
apparel, and then I got like a little nice note and a few photos of like them wearing the shirts and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't like a meet the celebrity kind of thing, but it's just one of those,
Sure.
wow, I'd like, what just happened? I did not expect that email to go through. I think like in the end, I put it out there because I was like, I like the show, and the fact that they liked what I did so much so that they're like, oh, I'd like to pay you because like you like our show. We would prefer people that like our stuff to work on our stuff. So
Yeah.
here you go. And I was like, this is awesome. So it happened a few other times. It's like very surreal when it happens, and I'm just like, this
Yeah.
is really cool.
Yeah. I think from all the conversations I've had with designers, it's mind blowing how many times, yeah, you would just be surprised that just being there,
Yeah,
just posting something, will kind of open up the opportunity. And like, if you don't, it's just not there.
that
So the amount of times just being there.
yeah, I think you like hit the nail on the head. Like that is, it's that like manifestation thing, right? Like
Yeah.
if you don't will it, you don't do it, then like it doesn't exist. So make it happen. And
Yeah.
like if nothing, the worst that happens is like you created something new and then it stopped. If anything, you're contributing to your craft and putting in those hours that you need to do to actually become the professional.
Hmm.
And like it's a win-win in my opinion.
Yeah. Post the kind of stuff you want to do, and
Yeah,
hopefully someone asks you to do it
yeah,
and get
and
paid for it.
it sounds like easier than it is. It definitely doesn't always work, but
Sure.
still just do work. I always have this thing at when I'm at the office or when I'm talking to new clients or whatever. I don't like getting like caught up in all of the minutia and all of the kind of politics of things. I just like to step back, and my whole mantra to things is like, I just want to do cool things. It's like, let's do it. Like, let's dust all of the nonsense to the side and like, let's create more cool things to put into the world.
That's a good fallback.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other like kind of tips or words of advice you would have for maybe people who are kind of early in their design careers or want to be engaged in this community, but are still trying to figure out how to do that?
Get out there is number one. Like no
Yeah.
matter what, it's just get out there. Break outside of your like your shell, your bubble, whatever you call it, and
Hmm.
just talk to people. I definitely, you can tell the people that have like not done it before and get out there and they kind of like get into a conversation. They don't necessarily know what to talk about it, but the more that you flex that muscle, the more that you network, the more you get into those circles, the more comfortable you're going to be with like whether it's putting down an opinion or it's just like becoming friends with these people. Like
Hmm.
we all know, like nobody is going to like put you down. We're all there as long as we're all talking about making cool stuff and like just we all know we're there for the same purpose. Nobody is going to be like, oh man, like you're talking about some creative aspect that I'm not into. No, we're all into it, and it's totally fine. It's always so weird when people are awkward about it. I maybe like I'm definitely more outgoing. I don't know. If you talk to me, I can talk about pencils for an hour. Like that's how much I love what like we do.
That's true. As someone who's not even a designer, but who works at a place that interacts with a lot of
Yeah.
designers, man, there is no community that will be down to geek out over really niche things like
Oh
that,
yeah.
like that community
Yeah. Well,
in an awesome way.
just before we like started recording, we just like nerded out a little bit on like the hat I'm wearing.
That's
That's
true.
such a like a random thing to nerd out on, but it's those details that we all fall in love with, and that's
Yep.
why we're here, right? So strike up a conversation. That's it.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the cool things about the internet. Even it's easier than ever
Yeah.
to find people who like these really niche things that you do. Whereas, if you didn't know anyone in your neighborhood or your physical social bubble who did, then you were kind of
Yeah.
alone. But when you can find other people online or at these conferences who you really geek out about 90s cartoons as well,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, that's a special thing. It's something that I don't think really existed 10 to 15 years ago, even. Anything else you want to add kind of on the topic before we kind of wrap up here?
I don't know. This is just a good conversation.
Yeah.
I just have fun. It's always good talking with people. This is one of my like favorite things to do. There's a number of times I've just gotten on calls very similar to this. We're all the same beast. We all sit at a desk, create, draw things on paper. So there usually tends to be a laptop in front of people. So if you can't get
Hmm.
out, sometimes just reaching out via a digital format. It's
Yeah.
not the best, but it is still in existence. Like I've definitely talked to a number of designers where we're just like, I like your stuff, you like my stuff. Let's talk about this thing and like get to know each other a little bit more, because that might also be like a new connection in another country that you can lean on. So the next time you want to go to a conference or question going to that conference, you
Hmm.
now know somebody that might be going to that conference, and it makes it that much easier, and you can like kind of tag team and do the buddy routine through that thing. So
That's true.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a
that's
good
another
point.
good way to get in.
I'd say everyone's kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, for sure.
It's happened for me even with a handful of marketing professionals, people I've looked up to and just kind of reached out, decided to shoot an email or whatever medium. And no one's ever going to be annoyed or unflattered by hearing, hey, I really look up to you. Any
Yeah.
words of advice, or
Yeah,
would you want to talk?
it's true.
Um,
I don't think I've ever been like shut down. Well, maybe I've been shut down in the sense like, oh, I can't do it like this week,
sure.
or like no, it's it's not really something I want to do. But like I've heard some pretty awesome stories about people that like get on calls with some of the most famous designers just because they dropped an email in their inbox, and like
Yeah,
what's the worst they could do is say no, then you're back where you were.
exactly. Who's ever going to be mad about that?
Yeah, exactly. It's just another email that you either have to respond to or just kind of dust
Or
away.
don't get a response.
Yeah,
And that's not the end of the world
exactly.
or anywhere close.
No, not at all. Yeah, this was awesome. I always enjoy talking to you guys, and I do love what you guys are doing to also like kind of bring in that creative community, as far as like the printing stations that you always bring to these fringe festivals or whatever. Like
Yep.
this is how we got in contact. It's pretty cool. It's all through this weird unspoken community.
It's true. Yeah, it really is this mythical design community that
Yeah,
it exists. I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful we got to connect as a fan of your work prior to this.
awesome.
This has been a
Well,
blast.
thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, have a great one, man.